Hey folks.
Hey everyone. Give
I have
everybody.
not gotten out of my chair since like 9 a.m. I'm going to step away real quick, come right back, but I'll be right back.
Yep, I'm gonna give everybody a couple more minutes.
I know Jenny said she wasn't gonna be able to make it.
I was afraid I was gonna be late, but luckily court went really fast.
And I haven't heard from anybody saying they weren't coming.
Right, I think we are good to go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody. Good to see you on this lovely Wednesday afternoon. Did everyone have a chance to look at the agenda? And we're good with the agenda. What about the meeting notes from last month? Are we good with those? Any changes, corrections? Okay. Moving on. Evidence-based practices training follow-up discussion. So we needed to have more discussion this month. Last month, I know we were missing some key players. The work group, the CHINS work group that CSU was working on, we are actually putting that on hold right now. Due to the loss of Mark, who was really going to lead that, as well as a number of other projects we have going on. So we've discussed that we're not in a position to really start up that work group. However, we would love to work with everyone. Should you all want to go ahead and start a work group, we would be happy to be part of that, ours at the moment. So I know we wanted to wait to have more players at the table who had really mentioned more interest in that. So that is up for discussion.
Hey, Krista, you keep like cutting in and out, at least for me, or I don't know if you are for other
Anyone
people.
has thoughts? Do I? Oh, no. Okay. Yeah, it's our internet. I don't think it's ever gonna get,
Are you able to join by phone, like on your cell instead of
Okay.
on a computer?
give me a minute. So did you hear anything I said? Hang on. Yeah,
Very little.
yeah, hold on.
Every fourth word or so.
All right, is this any better? Is it clear? Okay, sorry about that. We have all kinds of issues. So what I was saying is I talked last month about how we have been in discussion with our technical assistant through Casey and have been talking about the CHINS work group that we had wanted to put together through that project. However, with losing Mark and us not being really in a fully staffed position in any way at the moment, we decided that it's not feasible for us to really start that up at the moment. So we would love if programs wants to look at starting a work group with specific people to discuss CHINS and some of the issues surrounding CHINS and services, then we're happy to participate. We're just not in a position at the moment to really be able to get one going and lead one. So I wanted to open it up for some further discussion about that. Hopefully everybody heard me that time. Okay. Are there any thoughts on that?
So I was just gonna say, we have the non-mandated work group going on with CPMT as well. And so I'm wondering if this might be a piece of that discussion. And that might be a place to kind of sort through more detailed, I think, and then maybe come back to program with an idea of what might work. I'm just thinking that might be a good place to have that conversation. I don't know if other folks have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, and I know when we met, we talked about really needing to bring the schools in on that work group as well. So everyone would be represented, hopefully in Region 10 too.
Yeah, if I would be in support of moving forward with a CHIN specific work group, just, including Krista, the work that you all have done it, with Annie, Casey, and just your input. But I think that there's I think there are gaps and things that we can, that we've talked about that would be good to start addressing, whether that comes, Jennifer, from the non-mandated work group that's happening in CPMT. I'm not sure where it fits, but I would be in favor of moving forward with a work group.
So the non-mandated work group, we just had one meeting and it was really to talk about the use of our non-mandated funds because we're not using them. And so the point of the group was to, because those funds have always been set aside for the CSU kids on probation. So it was really a conversation about, do we need to continue to kind of protect these funds for those kids, or should we talk about opening it up to other kids as well? So that was where the conversation kind of went. And we talked about, maybe looping it or bringing in some of our school folks to provide some information about what they're seeing with CHIN services and kids that might benefit, and just kind of gather some more information about what these other cases or these other kids might look like, kind of who we're talking about, that isn't able to be served in another way. So that's kind of where we are with that. And so they could, trickle into each other. But we've just had that one conversation and are trying to get a little bit more information about if it's not going to be set aside for the court service unit kids only, who are those kids that we're talking about that would meet the non-mandated criteria. I think there is still an interest in preserving some of that money for court service unit kids, because if we have a court ordered placement that we need to pay for, that's a huge chunk of change. It just hasn't happened in like the past 2 years. But I think the court service unit, and Chris, I don't mean to speak for you guys, is interested in having that money available, and at the same time recognizing that we need to use it or lose it. So we're just trying to figure out where to go.
Yeah, absolutely, Katie.
So I think from city schools perspective, right, like we're working really hard not to bring kids to the court service unit, and therefore they are not being mandated as chins. It also means we don't have a funding stream, but they meet the letter of the law as chins kids, right? So it puts us in a bind about how to get services for the kids.
We talked about that, because they don't have to be chin services to be eligible for non-mandated.
Right, that's what I'm saying, but given that money has been reserved for court service unit.
Yeah, exactly. So I was going to say something else. Oh, and there are also kids that might not be eligible for sped rap through the schools. And so we're going to have another meeting in March. We haven't scheduled that, but we were going to, Jody, if you are the person for that from city schools, then great. Or if there's somebody else, let us know to bring into the conversation. That would be great.
Sure, you can just let me know when it is in March, and either I'll be there or I will figure out who that person
Sure.
is.
And we also talked about, in addition, one of our DSS prevention social workers in the school, because they don't necessarily carry a prevention caseload, but they might have kids that they're working with that there might not be a funding stream for, or we've used other funding streams to pay for services for those kids when, we might not, this might be an extra funding stream. And I know the city schools, it looks a little different maybe in terms of who might be the appropriate person to come, but yeah, if you could join us, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, we'd hope to talk about using those funds for prevention. And I know Martha and I have been discussing it for a while, because we're all about prevention and preventing the kids from coming here, but then there's not that funding stream. It's really lacking with that. So that's one of the things we're hoping to be able to do with them.
Yeah, I think on our end, that would be amazing. I mean, I think we are, nothing personal to the court service unit. We don't want to bring our kids or families there. We are actively looking for ways to not come. And I think sometimes we feel like our hands are tied. We don't have any other way to do it. We've exhausted every other option that we have. I know there are going to be some times where it's not just about funding, like there are other things that we need, and that's why we're at the court service unit. But there are times where it's purely because we need funding, and we've worked with Region 10 and we've assessed that it's not an appropriate parental placement situation, whether it's for in the community or out. So but I think there are lots of ways where we feel like we are just bumping into a funding issue, and the school has very limited ways to get funding for our kids who are non-mandated. The other thing, and I would be all for a CHINS work group too, somehow, Check and Connect is an evidence-based program. And I love Kamisha Spencer, who told me that we have a few slots that we're working on, but we need evidence-based programming for our younger kids, not just for our high schoolers. And we used to have that. It was a long time ago that we had that service, but looking at how we can provide evidence-based practices for our elementary school kids. And I know with COVID, we are trying to approach chronic absenteeism. We have been for a while now, but our numbers are pretty daunting, just about why kids are not coming and what's going on, and really looking at barriers. But I am definitely concerned about what's going on and how we're going to impact kids and families around school. It's not usually just school that's the issue. And even with our additional mental health providers through school, we're not going to be able to serve everybody. And so how our community can really look at community providers specifically around Check and Connect, whether it's grants, things of that nature, I think would be great, whether, that CHIN's work group, or it sounds like the non-mandated work group. I'm not sure that that's what they would be doing, but so to Ellen's point, maybe a CHIN, like agreeing that a CHIN's work group we need that specifically.
Other thoughts, Alice or Erica?
I just agree with what's been said. I think we need to move forward with some sort of CHIN's work group and see what we can cover. I did think there's potentially a little overlap with the other one at points, but I'm also in agreement. It's bigger than just how to utilize the non-mandated funds.
So does anyone want to head that up, or what are your thoughts about getting started with that? Because I guess I agree. I hate to have two work groups doing the same thing, but it does sound like we're more to talk about what to do with the non-mandated funding, but CHIN's, there's a whole plethora of other issues that go along with CHIN's. So I don't know if that's something y'all want to think about, and when we come back next month, maybe have a plan to get that up and going. Do we want to go ahead and try to get it up and going?
Is it something where we could say, yes, let's meet, and then we could talk and figure out who makes sense to head it from that point of at least coming together for an initial discussion group? I don't know if that's copacetic, or we need to, choose somebody right away to lead us off.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that would work. That would work for me, and get the the players together and then see who really wants to do that. We just kind of need a point of contact to get people together to set something up. Jennifer, Katie.
I'm happy to try to coordinate a meeting. I guess that my question is, who is going to be on this work group in addition to or other than who's here? I don't,
Yeah.
like I can certainly try to pull another meeting together, but it seems duplicative if it's the same people that are here.
Right.
I guess that's just my first thought.
Well, why don't we talk about it next month when we have time to think about it, and who from our agencies or who would be the best representative on that group, and then come back next month and give you those names and then try to pull it together.
That's fine.
Is that okay? Is that good for everybody?
So
okay. Go ahead.
I feel like I'm going to be the lone, I feel like if we go out another month, at least for the school schedule, and by the time we actually have a meeting, we will the end of school will be here. And I'm just totally being selfish. I'm thinking about the kids that we are working with. Like, we lose more kids over the summer. Our kids who are really struggling, who are already not coming to school, it is very hard to keep them connected to us when they already are not coming. So in my head, I'm thinking like, I'm guessing I'm probably going to be coming to this next, the CHINS meeting, and probably will be looking to bring somebody from our, 7-12 and then our pre-K 4. So for me, it's like, can we schedule a meeting and people bring, whether it's going to be yourself or somebody that in your agency, because I just feel like I'm losing time. Like, nothing is really, we're making some progress, but losing progress in other areas. And at least from city schools, like, we just need to start working on what are our other options. Like, all of the traditional services that we have, it's working for some kids, it's not really working for other kids and families. And so every month that we push off, I just feel like, we need something more than what we have. And that's just totally my own personal opinion. I'm not super excited to get to be on another work group, but it's important. And so I know our calendars are busy, but it's not going to be any less busy for me in April or May or June. So I would just love for us to, let's just get moving and see what we can try to accomplish.
And next
And
month,
it's okay if I'm overruled. Like, I just felt compelled to say it.
and next month is spring break too, during our program meeting, right? And so maybe that makes sense to at least meet to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good with that too.
I'm good with that too, Jody.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that
Makes sense.
awareness in. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will send something out to all of you guys for a meeting to talk about CHINS. And I'm not going to say I have very specific bullet points of discussion, but maybe that's part of what we can nail down, some specifics. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Katie. Yeah, and thanks, Jody. I mean, that makes sense. Sometimes we fail to think about that piece of it.
If it's that first week and it's over spring break, nobody from school will be available.
No, I'm going to try for later this month. You think that's doable?
All right. So I know we have Charles here to talk a little bit about some of the issues, the placement issues. Do we want to go ahead and allow her time to discuss that before we just move on with the rest of the agenda? Okay. And so I know we were wanting to have further discussion about the problems we're having with finding residential placements or any kind of placement at times for certain youth. And some of the suggestions we had talked about was perhaps creating a crisis team to meet needs within the community. Respite care was needed, we discussed. So we really wanted to bring someone from CAF to really give us some input from them. To talk a little bit about that, what are we going to do about the youth who have the need for immediate placement, but we have no place but the office or a hotel room for them. So I don't really know if someone wants to lead off that discussion. Kamisha, or
is it helpful to give a little bit of background of Charles E. about kind of what brought this up?
Yeah, I mean, I think I know, but
Well, it's actually a county issue, so I don't want to speak for Jennifer, but if it's helpful.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear more background for sure.
Yeah, so Alice, I don't know if you want to sort of jump in with what we're seeing.
I would just say we've had multiple incidents with what are largely high acuity children. where we can't find any placement for them, and we've had to sit with children, or one youth in particular, 24/7 at our office for several days, and there have been some other instances where we were geared up to do that, and at the very last minute something happened, and there are two of them right now, who are, each of the youth are in need of residential level care. One just got discharged from the residential placement they had been in, and they continue to recommend ongoing residential. And in that instance, we, CAF, fortunately for us and the youth, has identified a week or two. I think it's turned out to be more like 2 weeks worth of placement, but that will be coming to an end soon. And similarly, another youth who early on we tried to find residential, couldn't, CAF Home tried, and because of this youth's need, that's not working out. And so that youth too needs to leave, and in that instance, the CAF provider's been, remarkably gracious about trying to buy us time for looking. And like in that instance, the foster care worker has contacted 57 placements, both in state and out of state, and it has yet to identify someone. Then we're continuing to look, and that arrangement is going to come to an end next week if we don't have another placement, and we're going to be back in housing a youth at social services, which isn't a good place for anyone to have sleepovers, much less one of our foster youth. We need to be able to do better by these children. They deserve a lot more from us. But that's sort of where that is, and driving what our need to want to talk about. Can we do more and better?
So is the ask for CAF or of CAF what we are doing in terms of recruitment of foster families for crisis situations, or like, are there specific questions that I can answer or help suss out?
Well, I wasn't at the last meeting, and I think when the team decided to invite a CAF person, so I don't know all the thoughts. I know that I've personally, we have our traditional model of regular foster care, which largely, CAF seeks to meet that need, and I wonder about the possibility of thinking differently and recruiting for that need, and the ancillary services might look different too. One of our youth who we spent the night with for several nights, so we found the placement. We never found a residential placement that would take her, that was her recommended level of care. But a group home ended up being willing to try her if we paid for round the clock one-on-one aid, as well as private day school, which we did, and so that's been going on for probably pushing 2 months now, and as long as it works, it's great, and we're happy to send whatever resources we need that way. But I wonder if there's more room to do that kind of thing with our CAF model. If not as the permanent placement, then at least as a bridge, so we can identify the permanent.
Or I think the other thing that we had talked about was some sort of model where there's a lot of support built around a foster home. Like somebody, I don't know, we mentioned like virtual residential, that kind of model. And so I don't know if there's what that might look like, or if there's the ability to work on building something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're looking at CAF and how our foster homes operate now, and the families that we are currently supporting, I think if there are community supports in place that can offer, like the things that Alice said that the group home needed, like that extra level of supervision, or that, school piece that is going to come through. Like, I think our foster families would be more likely to be able to support these kids in this community. But the way we're currently set up, like, we expect our foster parents to parent like a typical family. And for the kids that need a higher level of supervision or a higher level of care, that require more support, we're going to need to provide more support and community supports in order for them to be able to stay with our families, for sure.
So Charles, am I so if we were able to call a family and say, hey, here's this kid and these issues, and are you willing, and here's the additional supports we can offer on the front end, you're saying that there's more folks that may be able to pitch in that scenario than what we're able to do right now?
Yes, I do think so. So I think part of what CAF is trying to do now, because we are recognizing the need for families that can support kids that are in crisis situations, and older kids and teens. So we are kind of changing our narrative from we just want foster parents to we want foster parents who can support this need in our community. So we are changing what we're looking for and who we are. We're not just going to approve people willy-nilly. So we are changing that. And within that, I think if we were able to say to families who are willing to take on teens or older kids, if we could say, would you be able and willing to take on an older kid or teen who is in crisis, because we need somewhere for them to go, but we also can offer you these supports and this help on the front end so that it doesn't feel as chaotic as it is. I do think we could potentially have more families that are willing to do that for us and with us.
So I'm wondering if there's a partnering even within community attention with the mentors that you all have to be partnering with that as some of those supports, and have it be part of a sort of a crisis package in some ways of just, I don't know, and Kamisha, that's probably more in your part of the house than, but I'm just sort of wondering if that would even be a possibility.
Chauncey, were you getting ready to say something? I think what you're asking for is definitely doable, but that would be considered for us a new programming piece of it, because it wouldn't be in the same lines of community support services. It would be more intensive, and we're not at that level of intensity. So it is a suggestion that I am noting in my notes as a possibility.
I think it would be worth exploring as well within the community at large. I know that one of the other challenges that we keep running into is the wait lists for, intensive in-home providers, and even mentors and things in the community at large. And I would hate to be in the process of talking with a family about providing a community, a crisis situation, but then not be able to provide that backup because of the demands that are happening. So it seems like if we could figure out a way to have it be, I don't know, more dedicated in-house or something that's, yeah.
I think the only other thing I would say out loud is that when we ask families to help us in supporting kids that are in crisis, that sounds short term. And so in order to not burn out our families and to also continue to support other kids in crisis, we just have to be diligent in continuing to move them to the appropriate level of care if that is what needs to happen. And sometimes they start to settle out and it's lovely, but it's also could be a honeymoon period and then crisis happens again. And we maybe should have worked on transition planning instead of leaving them there. And we set not just the family, but the kid up for failure too. And so providing that wraparound service initially on the front end in the foster home, yes. But then also continuing to keep in mind that like, this is not probably a permanent option, and continuing to work on what's in the best interest for everybody.
I just also want to say, because I heard Alice say that for the kiddo who ended up at the group home with, it sounds like pretty intensive services on top of the group home, that you were also able to pay for a private day. And I don't know if that is through special education or not, or just somehow you were able to place that kid there. But I do think regardless of where that child's school placement is, really thinking about how to support the school placement, especially I think almost always school home, especially when a kid's in crisis, you know, when school is calling a foster home repeatedly and a kid can't stay, or they're relying on that kid being at school all day as part of their supervision plan. And just being fair and speaking from the school perspective, I think we work really hard to keep kids at school all day, but there are sometimes, you know, when kids are in crisis that they can't be at school either all day. And so asking the school to manage something where we're talking about the level of support that's being put in place at home, and then saying to school, like, you guys got this, right? That doesn't usually go that well. I will just say that. And so really thinking about if there's going to be this level of support at home, what does that partnership look like for the school, and how do we all work together? Because I am certainly on board with keeping kids in our community and partnering, and how do we make that work and be successful? But I think sometimes the quickest way for things to be unsuccessful is not having the school getting the support or knowing how to support that kiddo, and then that blows out the placement, or vice versa. So I just want us to also think about what could that look like. It can't just be from when the kid gets home from school until the kid arrives at school that they have those additional supports. We have to be prepared on our end too. And sometimes we like to say that we always have the resources, but sometimes we are not prepared when that kiddo walks through our door in the way that we need to be.
I think also one of the questions that was brought up from Jenny last time we met was the need for respite, and respite in the sense of somewhere to go in the meantime, Chelsea, until they could find placement. So I don't know if you could touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, we are able to provide some kind of respite. I think it's the same concern that I brought up a second ago, that like sometimes kids are placed in our foster homes and it's respite, and the kid does really well and settles in, and then it's no longer 2 weeks, it's 3 months, and the kid needs more support, and the family wasn't prepared for 3 months of this child in their home. They were committing to 2 weeks. And so we burn out our families that are for respite by not honoring that timeline for them. So I think that's something that does happen. I also think we are able to, for the most part, meet respite needs. I think it's the same population that we are seeing in need for, actual placement that we struggle to find respite for our older kids and our teens. And so I'm hopeful as we move forward with our recruitment and our training of new parents that we are going to be able to increase the number of families that can provide for that demographic that we are really struggling with. So I think we can generally do it now for short term. I'm hopeful that as we're moving forward, because we're changing our narrative and how we are looking at our recruitment, that we can provide it, and I can say it more confidently in the future.
So I was just going to chime in and say, I don't think there's sort of this, like, there's the question, here's the answer. Like, I think it's an ongoing conversation. The reality of where we're at, not just in our community, but in general, is you've got providers who don't have enough staff, so they don't have beds, or you have, where they say they take this type of kid, but when the kid has that behavior, they don't want the kid there anymore. And so the reality is we're faced with, these are the kids in our community. We need to serve them. And when we can't find these kinds of services, the question is, what can we do on our side to build capacity for that? And so it really is about engaging CAF around how can we build capacity within what you offer, knowing that the needs that some of these kids have are going to probably be beyond what's realistic for CAF to provide, but also recognizing that residentials aren't going to take them. Like, they're turning our kids down. And so then we're left with, well, what do we do with that? And even with Kamisha talking about, that type of mentoring or one-on-one service is a very different service than what you guys are normally providing. And the reality is we don't know how often we'd access it. And so then is it sustainable for you guys to even have something like that? But the reality is, when we can't place these kids and we need this service, like, how do we build capacity to make it work? And I think that's really like what CPMT is trying to have conversations about. It's what's coming down to you guys trying to sort through, like, how do we manage these things, the kids, and some of the, the acuity that we're seeing with them, even with the Region 10 cases, like, they're getting pretty complicated, and they're getting harder to serve because there's fewer providers, there are fewer beds. And it all comes around to, again, like, how do we build capacity within our community, knowing that this is happening, like, globally? I don't think it's just, in Charlottesville now, Marl. I think it's happening all over the place. Like, Katie probably sees the CSA coordinators group across the state where they're like, this is what I've got. I can't find anything. Like, please make a recommendation. And that's the same thing that we've been in. So again, like I said, my thought is just, is there a way to continue having the conversation, figuring out, are there things that we can develop here that we could use as resources? And that's really kind of what the conversation is about. Like I said, I don't know that there's sort of this final, here you go, this is what we can do, but thinking through, like, what is realistic. So anyway, I was just putting that out there.
Yeah, and I would chime in and say it is a real concern. I mean, there's at least one youth that we have that we're case managing at Region 10 right now that we've been searching for a placement for 6 months, I think, at this point, and have been unsuccessful in finding one within state, as well as looking out of state. And due to the complexity of the issues that are presenting, and the only way that it's been able to be sustainable, and it's not sustainable, but we have a parent who's on FMLA leave at home and wrapping around as many services that we can from the community. And that's just sort of maintaining while we can continue the search. And so in the case of, with you all over at social services, if we didn't have that parent, what would we do? And if that would be wrapping around, certainly, we would be happy to partner in that as much as we can. I'm thinking about our crisis services, crisis counseling, short-term services that we have at Region 10, and whether that would be able to be partnered in, for a kid in crisis and supporting a CAF family, whether there would be some more emergent wraparound, from the ICC team of doing not a full ICC case, but doing some creative planning around some of that, whether that would be a support, so I'd be happy to look at, what some of those capacity points would be. But I agree, Jennifer, I think it's a community group effort to figure that one out.
I think that I agree with what you're saying, Jennifer, but I guess if somebody could clarify from this group, like if it's CSA, is it not just that we can't open up more funding? And when I say open up more funding, I mean like open up how community partners can access the funding. Because a large part of prevention, if a kid does not have a JTS number for us, then we depend on whoever the referring source is to go back and secure funding. So then how do you open up CSA money so that we could do more prevention services as a community partner? Then how do you open up more CSA funding streams so that we can provide more intensive community support services? So I guess I'm not sure I'm clear on like, how is it, like who in this group has the connection or has the ties to the funding source to open it up for community partners to be able to access the funds to provide the services that our community is in need of?
I think that's a good question, Kamisha. I mean, from a prevention standpoint, I had the same thought earlier when we were talking about non-mandated funds, and that, like, that's where my head goes. Those would be the services that are appropriate. I think that what I hear the feedback on is it's not so much that we can't get to the funding, but we don't have people to provide the service. So, there's probably a bit of both. I mean, I'm sure there's pockets and situations where the challenge is how do we get to the right funding source. But I think at the end of the day, here it is, it's 3:00 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. And if I've got a kiddo coming into my office at 5 and they're either going to go somewhere to somebody's home or they're going to sleep on a cot in our office, who do we put in place between right now and 5 p.m. to get where we need to get? And so if we're calling around to providers and they don't have any staff, they don't have the service, like we're kind of hung up right there. So I think that's good 2 points, a good 2 points to tease out, and figuring out in this particular scenario, what is it? Is it the front end that where we're not putting things in place soon enough, and so therefore we're in a crisis that we're responding to, or do we have the opportunity to really do we need to take the opportunity to really enhance the crisis-based services and the response as opposed to the prevention?
All right, any other discussion, questions? Lots of good conversation. So I think
I just wanted to say one other thing, that with some of these kids have also exacerbated the challenge. We've had youth who, in at least one instance, what the primary reason they're having to exit their placement or the residential facility they were in was they assaulted staff. And this is a older, like 17, older youth, not a little child. So the charges were pressed as a result. And in that instance, it was all dismissed because it was determined to be a mental health problem. And I'm not saying that it's not. in that instance. I'm not arguing the rightness or wrongness of that, but I am saying that that is a behavior that makes it really hard to place you. So we can't get you in the place where you might get help because of that behavior, because that place wants to see you curtail that before you're there. And then the traditional means of when you do something like that, this is your consequence, and hopefully it, you might, a charge might deter you in the future. Like, that's not necessarily available either. And I'm not making the argument that it should be. I'm just saying it complicates the efforts when that's part of the history that's mixed in when we're trying to identify a placement. And so.
So any ideas about direction moving forward? Or do we want to make sure that we continue to revisit this monthly? Again, though, it seems the urgency requires something more immediately than waiting.
So I've been listening intently. I'm just not sure that we're going to come up with a magical service, to address the level of acuity that's being described. But I do wonder if the core agencies could have like a contact, right? Like, it's one thing to make a referral for a kiddo where you're like, I can't find a placement. It's another thing where you're like, this kiddo is going to be sleeping on the DSS cot tonight because we've exhausted everything. And so, there's a part of me where it's like, if I knew that I contacted Charles Lee because we are at like DEFCON 10, and I called Jody because it's a city schools kid and they have a placement at CAF, but it's going to be very fragile and they're going to be in city schools. And so I'm not going to do my typical enrollment. I'm going to call Jody and I'm going to contact Ellen because we need help with what this wraparound is going to like. Who are the core agency contacts? Is it Ashley for Almar? Like, who is it? Because we need an immediate meeting to see what we can put in place. And that's the team that's going to meet, or they're going to say like, I'm going to assist with this first one. And then I'm going to tell you who your Buford contact is going to be. They're aware that this is like super fragile. If this drops, everything's exploding. Like, for me, that's the part that we could potentially have some level of control over to get, because I just feel like every kiddo is so individualized that we'd have to have a plan, and that those are the things that we could have some leverage or control over to make a sustainable plan work for that one kid. And then if the next kid pops up, then we could come up with something there. But coming up with a one size fits all service, I'm thinking like that could take 2 years. We don't have 2 years. We have like, I'm guessing Almar could get a kid 3 days from now, or the city could have a kid sleeping on their couch tomorrow. And that's not going to help those kids or families. So that's like in my head. And again, that make no sense. And I'm okay with that. What could we do right now? Versus like, I just feel like we'll be revisiting this for months and DSS will still feel super frustrated about 50, referrals out being told like, thank you, but no, thank you. We have no beds.
Well, I think that's a really good idea, Jody.
Yeah.
I was trying to wrap my head around the same, like, how would we have that conversation quickly and have that, crisis response team, for lack of a better word, that we could activate in that moment. And then the other question that I have is, like, what is that list of services? Like, really, what is that list of specific services that we're going to need in those situations, so that then we can start to talk to providers. If you already provide this and we call it, it's currently called this, What do we need to do to expand that list so we have enough providers? Because you know, I know that these scenarios feel very huge and urgent when they're happening. I know that Alice has reached out to our suits trying to get a sense of like really what is the frequency, what are the numbers of this? Because 1 in 12 months feels really big when it's happening, but 1 in 12 months maybe isn't as bad. So although I would say we're clearly doing this more than once a year. But anyways, if that makes sense, like I like in my head, those are kind of two compartments that I think you're right. Like what we can control right now is let's get the key people in place so that when we have these questions, we have a team approach with everybody's expertise from their setting. And then 2, let's create this list, generate this list of what we need so that we can figure out how do we get to yes? How do we make it happen?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And just being able to come from a creative place of pulling some of those things in.
So is this something, and that's great. Jody, thanks for bringing that up. Because I think when we speak more something, we need something immediately, because like you said, it could happen tomorrow. It could happen tonight. Who are those key people? Is that something we want to identify now?
Yeah, I think that would probably be helpful.
Yeah, if we can, I'd like to.
Yeah. Me.
Yeah.
I'm also happy. I will send it in an email, like my cell phone. That's probably the easiest way. You're welcome to send me an email, but my cell phone number to text or call is, if it, you know, emergency wise, is the best way to actually get me.
Yeah, I would concur with that as well for contacting me.
Is there somebody at CAF besides the regular admissions person that wants
Yeah,
to
that's what I was
be that
gonna
point of
say.
contact?
Yeah, so we have our typical intake person, and I think if it's just noted that this is the like crisis activated team, like
Desperate.
yeah,
Desperate
I'm
situation.
sound the alarm, and I'm happy to be the person that it comes to.
We'll
Alice,
make
do you have
sure
thoughts?
that folks know this isn't just for any regular referral.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's like, give them a little bit of time to contact you back. And if this is really a crisis, this is.
What about Ashley? Is there someone at county schools that we could notify or be part of this, or would that be you?
I mean, it could be me. I'm still new, so that's why I'm just kind of like sitting back. But yeah, I can also share my work number as well.
Yeah, and I don't know if you would need us for anything, but you can always contact me if you need something.
I would say from Albemarle department, I don't know that I'm the best contact, Alice. I don't know if you have a different idea. I'm not in that program area that tends to be involved in those on the front end. So, I mean, if it makes the most sense, I'm happy to. But if it makes sense, Alice, for you to identify somebody else or yourself, but whatever.
I appreciate that. I think maybe if one of our foster care soups is available, if it's not our case, they might be a good resource to have in a discussion, just in case they know of resources that like the city foster care worker maybe hadn't tried or something, or vice versa, because they're the ones who, like Amy knows what the 57 placements are that John's called. I don't have any idea. So that might be the way to but then if they're not available, Erica, that would be great if you're willing to help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can share my I can share my personal cell phone number because that works better than my work cell phone when I'm at home. That just doesn't ring here. So just tell me where to send it and I'll send you that number. And then the other question that I had too was maybe Charles and Kamisha, like from a provider perspective, And from folks that are working directly with the foster families, like what services would they identify would be really helpful and are needed. Because if we already have them and we just hadn't thought of them yet, that's an easy plug. But if we haven't, created that service yet, that's something that we can approach providers with and say, hey, here's what we need. Who's interested in doing this?
Yeah, I think it feels like in my brain a mixture of mentoring and intensive in-home, kind of that thing that Jody was talking about. Like a lot of our foster parents work, they have other kids. And so sending them to school is how they're supervised. And so when we get a call from the school or from wherever they're supposed to be, and it's like, please come get them. And that part, trying to figure that out. So having a provider that can step in with that trauma-informed care to help cool down the situation, also provide supervision, maybe some coaching around how to not tear things up when things are hard.
Yeah, I like to call that home-based counseling.
I love that. That's beautiful. Home-based counseling. That would be a very
It's not
lovely.
quite the intensive in-home that has very specific parameters, but it's
Yeah.
a little bit more robust than mentoring. And
Yeah.
yes.
I think that service, that would be incredibly helpful for our parents.
Yeah. And I know when I worked in Culpeper years ago, so Judge Somerville at that time was a big advocate for, I think he called it the three guys from Hampton is what I think he kept calling it. That he'd heard of this many years ago in a conference, but it was this concept that kind of led us into providing virtual, Krista, I see you chuckling. I'm sure that you worked with Judge Somerville closely. But he really pushed us as a community to figure out this virtual residential model and like, what did that look like? How do we access it? So I'm happy to reach out to Judge Somerville and see if they're still doing that in Culpeper, what it looks like, and just some of my other contacts down here that may still be on the boots on the ground, so to speak, and activating this and figuring out how to respond, and just see if they have ideas or suggestions that may be helpful.
I know that NCG officially offers virtual residential, but I don't know what their capacity would be for a more fluid, rapid response.
Yeah, and there was an agency down here, or is an agency down here or up here, whatever direction I am, that was that agency that if you said, hey, I need a purple polka dotted wall that could do this, they'd be like, all right, we got it, we'll do it. So they always offer to do things, but they may have the capacity to do that, and they may not always come up to the Charlottesville, Albemarle area, but may have the capacity to send staff to do things like this. So it may be too that we can expand our provider list beyond just the ones that we know are currently exhausted in our area. I don't know what the capacity looks like down here. So I'll explore, at least it's neighboring, it's kind of close, kind of not, but I'll explore my contacts in other localities that are around us.
Thanks, Erica. I think that would be good as well. And I know CPMT, we did bring up virtual residential, and I thought it was NCG that Ellen, you and I had worked at least one case with a virtual residential, I believe, but I wasn't sure if they were still doing it or not.
They technically are. I'm not sure how many of those cases they're actually providing right now. I know that they also have some, they were talking recently about more of a crisis like a sort of crisis counseling service that's being offered, that's Medicaid funded, that's I don't know. I'm still a little bit unclear about how we actually access that, because I haven't had the official interface with it, but that would be another thing to me, it would be worth having the conversation with our private providers that are in the area and just talk with, bring them in and have a discussion about, would you be an agency that if we ask for a purple polka dot wall, that you would take a crack at providing that on the fly, and being a part of some of that solution planning.
I just have a question for my own clarity. So when a situation were to arise where we're giving it a whirl, kid is needing placement, who would I expect a call from? Like, am I going to get that call from whoever the DSS contact is, or am I going to get the call from the worker? Because I think I just need to figure out what I'm expecting, because not going to lie, I'm usually running around like a mad person during the day. And so as I'm getting voicemails and texts, I just need to know, like, oh, Erica's the contact for like the bat signal. Erica's calling me. Like, I need to take this, versus I get a generic number from DSS and like, I will listen to that in 30 minutes after whatever hullabaloo is going on here. So I just need to know what I'm looking out for.
I think that's a great question, especially if we're sharing personal numbers that we may or may not share with other folks. I think it would make sense for whoever's on this bat team. I like the bat phone. Whoever's on that team to be maybe the ones that coordinate those calls, or who would initiate that. Seems to make sense to me.
Yeah, I think that
And-
makes sense.
Oh, sorry. And just to be clear, like we all say like, okay, I represent ACPS. And so if we get the call, from the call, is it like, hey, like we have this kid, can you come to this place? Or what's an idea of, I guess, the conversation or the need? So we know what we'll, I guess, have an idea as to what to expect, at least for me. I don't know for other people.
So I'm hearing it, and I'm just going to reflect back just to make sure that because of this discussion, I'm anticipating it to call out from, either Charlottesville DSS or Albemarle DSS, that they have a critical kid that doesn't have a place to go, and that we're wrapping around that with problem solving from all of our agency perspectives. And being so I guess and Jody, I appreciate your question of like, who would be that social worker call out. So, Alice, if that's not going to be you, or if that's not going to be Erica, if it's a, or would it be, to just sort of put out and activate the team? That's a good question.
I would imagine it would be one of my foster care supervisors, like, because they're the ones who would say, yeah, this meets criteria, whosever case it was. So I'm going to, they would take responsibility for alerting you all and taking you up on your very gracious offers to come together and problem solve.
Ashley, I think, and I could be envisioning this, but I think to Alice's point, like, I see my role as, if it's a city kid or a kid being placed in the city, that I would come to the table, hear what's going on, talk about how I could help make that transition to school as smooth as possible, figure out who the contact in whatever school that kiddo is going to be at, make sure I connect to that person at the school, get their contact info, give it to the team, and then really talk about what we might need to do both at the school, but then also be real with the team about like, hey, I see like those behaviors might be really tough for us to manage. So let's talk about what support we can provide this at school. I think we're also going to need some additional support and help at school. So can we talk about how we might get that in place and just try to help facilitate that, and make sure school is as prepared as we can be to help get that kid into school and help that be successful. And just linking those two things. I will be transparent. I am not going to be able to be the primary person at school, but making sure that they know who that primary person is, making sure that they have that. And I feel like that's what I can bring to the table to try and make that school piece go, hopefully as smooth as possible.
Yes, that
Does that
makes a
help?
lot of sense. Yeah, a lot. Thank you.
So how do we want to get the communication out as far as phone numbers and contact names? Any ideas? Do we want to send them all to one person and have that person send out an email? Okay.
If everybody wants to send them to me, I'm happy to be the one to collect and send it out to you guys. And then you can share it with the appropriate people.
Great. Thanks, Katie.
I just want to say, if not before, it really is quite possible next week we'll be calling you all. Because one of our situations is coming to an end, not, on Monday, if we haven't otherwise figured it out, then we don't know what we're going to do. So if you give your number, we'll use it.
Kamisha, is there someone other than a CAF person at community attention that would be involved in something like this, or is that more so after versus in the moment?
That would be after versus in the moment. So CAF is going to be in the moment, and we could follow up with the aftermath and support. And I can be that contact person for that.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, are we good to let Charles C. leave? Thank you so much, Charles C. We really appreciate you being here, and thanks for engaging and helping us out here.
Yeah, thanks for the conversation. Anytime, we're here. Bye.
Bye. Thank you,
Bye.
Charles Lee.
Bye, Charles Lee.
All right, so moving on with the agenda, any updates from FAPT? Erica or Katie?
No, I can't think of anything specific. I mean, the continued concerns and challenges around long wait lists. Just, running into that more and more, but other than that, no.
Nothing in particular besides that we, have seen cases go down. And like at least city case numbers are going down at least once a month. We're not really meeting, and schedules are pretty late. So.
Is everybody moving to the county?
It kind of seems like it.
Is that?
No,
I don't know that
yeah, I don't know about that. I think it's other things.
CSA coordinators, Katie and Jennifer, any updates?
I don't know if this is where we wanted to talk about the survey, or do we want to do that under family engagement?
We can do it now, our family engagement. I'm flexible.
Okay. Jennifer, did you have any other updates?
I don't think so. I was just going to mention the CSA conference is going to be October 31st through November the 2nd. They're actually going to do it in person. They're back at the Hotel Roanoke for this upcoming year. And they are still tossing around the idea of having like a pre-conference for CPMT members. They said it would probably be something like around strategic planning. And since you guys are subcommittee of CPMT, you would be welcome to attend that if you were interested. I think that's it.
Okay, so I sent out the survey questions. You might remember it's either last month or the month before when we were looking at the last quarterly survey results. It was kind of apparent that folks are rating their social worker or their CSA case manager instead of the providers, or that's what we think is happening. Again, it's hard to tell because our results are still pretty limited. But based on some of the comments, it seems like that's what was going on. So I met with Tamara at the county, who set up our survey and is kind of like a Survey Monkey expert, to ask her what could be done to help make it clear that we're talking about the services you're receiving that are being paid through CSA. And I think basically, unless you want to pay for it, Survey Monkey is not going to do anything too complicated. So at one point we had talked about, if they chose outpatient counseling, could we then have them answer all the questions about outpatient counseling? And then if they chose mentoring, have them answer all the questions about mentoring. She basically said, you can't do that. That's too complicated. But she said,
to look at the language on some of the questions, because when we went over it together, you know, I could see how folks could think that the questions were being asked about, like, for example, their DSS social worker. You know, if you see, what does it say? I forget where I saw it. But one of her suggestions was one to have some instructions on the survey instead of just jumping right into the questions. I don't know why we didn't think about that the first time around. And then her other suggestion was in front of the question to say something like, according to your answer in number 1, or based on your response to question number 1, blah, 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 blah. So I don't know what you guys are thinking about that, or any of those suggestions, or if there's anything specific that we would want to include in the instructions. I think we could make it very simple, maybe just a couple of sentences to make it clear about this. You're rating your service providers, not your CSA case manager or your social worker or your ICC clinician or any of those, or your school case manager. You know, maybe we just need to be, you know, be very kind of clear about that. So those are some suggestions. You know, we can certainly draft something and send it to you guys, or we can talk about it more today. Or if you guys have any other ideas that might help to make it clear that we're talking about service providers and not your case managers. The other thought was to go back, that we talked about, was to go back to our agencies and talk to case managers and remind them about the survey. So I don't know if anybody did that or if there was any feedback from case managers about it. If anybody has anything to say about that.
I don't have anything to say about your last question. On your first part about other things that would be helpful, I think instructions would be very helpful. And in that, say, we're not talking about your social worker, we're talking about your other service providers. And so when you're answering the question, that's what service provider, you know, however you want to word it.
Yeah.
But I definitely support the instruction idea.
And I haven't had any staff to remind, so when they all come back, I'll be happy to remind them and talk about it.
I did do a reminder. Oh, sorry, Krista.
No, should be next week, hopefully.
I did do a reminder, but I didn't get any feedback. And I think it would be a great idea to have a directions.
Yeah, I think initially we were really trying to limit the language as much as possible, not to make it too wordy. But I think we can include a couple sentences that are pretty simple and straightforward and to the point. So I'm happy to draft that and bring it back just for you guys to see. And so let's see, it's March. The next quarter would start in April. I'm wondering if we could just send it out by email for input, and then maybe we could get with Tamara and she could get it together so we could start using it for the April FAP meetings.
So Tamara is actually taking another position at the county, and her last day is March 11th. So if we want something, you know, if we need something for her to do before that, like, we need to get it done before then, which is a little bit of a time crunch, but.
Yeah, and I mean, it shouldn't take long.
And I would just add that Mary Stebbins is going to be our data person in her absence. So if we, for some reason, if we don't get it there before Tamara leaves, I'm sure Mary can make any amendments that'll be needed.
Okay, well, we'll just, it should be really quick. So I'll try to get that out to you guys in the next few days.
Great. Thank
I
you.
think- I think that was all we had.
All right, any partner agency updates?
I have a few just in regards to programming. So we're starting our spring session for KYEP. It's going to be March 14th through May the 15th, I think. With our summer programming starting for KYEP possibly June the 20th. So we are currently working on a flyer that we'll send out to the schools and other community partners with our information. But we are planning to go virtual. I'm sorry, we're going in person for the summer. So it will be an in-person academy. The numbers may be slightly lower than in times past, just because we're trying to transition with a smaller group. And Teens Give is actually currently in person right now. And so we are open for taking referrals for that as well. If you have pro-social referrals you'd like to send us. And our summer Teens Give is slated to start June 27th. But we are open now for referrals for in-person as well for Teens Give.
Any other updates from anyone?
I have an update, more that Region 10 is still is recruiting for different positions that are open. So currently we're recruiting an outpatient for a crisis clinician that's housed at Albemarle High School, as well as an outpatient clinician. And in the case management world, I will be recruiting for 2 positions. So I can share that Liz Schumann, who has been with us for many years, has taken a position, a promotion to Project Link Program Manager, which is wonderful for her. She will still be in communication with her through Project Link and her work with supporting women who are dealing with substance abuse and addiction issues. And she'll also have a role within FTC with the Family Treatment Court process. But it will obviously be a loss for the child and family team as well. Additionally, Cortasia Watson is stepping away from her role as ICC and is looking for something that is a little less clinical. And anyway, she's finding her path clinically. So I'll be recruiting for both of those positions. I don't think we have any other updates or changes that are happening as far as I know.
Anyone else? I know we're hoping to make some offers this week. So fingers crossed. 3rd time's charm, right? All right. Any updates on, we kind of cover these during updates too, but on service provision during COVID? Anything on your guidance and looking at last month's notes? I know Katie and Jennifer were drafting a form, or may have already drafted it and sent it to Ellen, and we just needed CPMT to approve it.
I have received those. They have also arrived as I am now dealing with being down to staff, which is a challenging moment, but we will figure it out and continue to move forward. So,
okay, sounds good. Feel your pain. Anything on any of our focus areas? I know we've kind of covered it in other areas as well.
One of the things that is coming up is the service gap survey. So that is due May 1st. So we'll need to talk about that at next month's program meeting to provide recommendations to CPMT. And I just got the reminder about this yesterday. So I can't remember, Jennifer, do you know if this is just a renewal year or we have to do the whole
Yeah.
assessment?
No,
Okay.
so on the even years, we just have to review what we did in the odd year and decide if we want to change anything. So this one should be pretty abbreviated. But we also, and I don't know if you guys need us to resend last year's service gap surveys. that
What
you
we can do is send the results from last year in the form for this year, so you can see what the questions are. But, you know, I think we maybe have, you know, given even our conversation today, we might want to, you know, add to it or look at changing some of our responses from last year. So we'll get that out to you guys, but we wanted to give you guys a heads up today in case you want to take it back to your agencies to discuss it all before next month's meeting, which I guess we need to figure out if next month's meeting is during spring break, school spring break.
I think we should have spring break.
That'd be nice.
Just saying.
It is during spring break. It's the first week of April.
So what do we want to do about that? Do we want to keep our meeting or do we ever move it?
I mean, we do need to meet to do the gap survey at least. So whether we reschedule or we just meet without the schools and give the schools the opportunity to, you know, provide feedback another way through email, or, you know, I'm happy to get with you, Jody, or however we want to do that. So we do need to meet or to at least do that.
I mean, Jody and Ashley, would you all be okay with sharing feedback before you go on spring break with Katie and Jennifer?
I mean, if we're meeting, I can actually meet. Because I'm not in the classroom, I don't technically have spring break, but I'll probably be working from home, but I can still log in. So
Okay.
I'll, you know, be able to join.
Okay.
I would be happy to give Katie or whomever feedback. Ashley's much nicer than I am. I will be off that week. So if the kids are off, I am taking off. So I will.
As you should.
Yes, it's been a long year. No, but I'm happy to give feedback, and I think it will absolutely be okay. I trust everybody here to make good decisions about our gaps.
Ashley, given you've noted you're someone new to your role, I would suggest that right now is excellent mentoring by a senior school staff of optimal responses to spring break work requests. Just a thought.
No, so because I know myself, in order to get it done, I probably wouldn't guarantee that I'll get it to you in a timely manner if I'm not on the call. So I would rather join the call, whether wherever, to get it done, instead of like having to get like a ton of emails from Jennifer or whoever, like, I need you to fill this out or sign this. So I'd rather just show up and get it done so I don't have to worry about it. So that's why, otherwise I would be like, oh no, I won't be attending.
All right. So we'll meet as scheduled, and Jody will give feedback to Katie prior. Trauma-informed services. Any update on trauma-informed services from anyone? Any other business, new business? Anything I should message out for CPMT other than a general update?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's got to be a special message, because we already update them, but I do know from Mary that the same question about high acuity kids at CPMT is in discussion about that. So I think they might be interested in the idea of the emergency response kind of team.
Yeah, I definitely will give them an update on that. Anyone opposed to adjourning? All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your week.
Happy spring break, school people.
Yes.
Yes.
Alice, don't sound like that. You gotta throw us a bone. Like, we get spring break. I mean, we have to take vacation. I have to take vacation. It's just like your vacation.
I know, I remember those days fondly, and I
Okay.
miss them greatly. No, I'm jelly. is
That's
what it
another
is.
reason why too. I'm like, I don't want to use my time for spring break, so I'm just gonna work from.
There you
Yeah,
go.
that's right.
So if I log in, then I'm doing work and I don't have to use my time.
Good. It's a good plan,
It's all
Ashley.
That's a good-
strategic.
that's
It's all
smart.
strategic. I'm playing
Yeah.
chess and not checkers.
Improve. Way to go.
See you
All
guys.
right.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.